All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today for the Southern Lake Michigan Fishery Workshop, formerly the South Haven Workshop, but obviously we've had to transition to online environment here. So we'll cover some issues pertaining specifically to Southern Lake Michigan, but also a lot that's really relevant to the whole of Lake Michigan. So I'll start off with some updates on some Michigan Sea Grant activities, including economic impact assessments, angler expectations, the Great Lakes Angler Diary, and some notes on fish ID. So we've worked a lot with charter fishermen to assess the economic impacts of the charter industry over the years, and we've even been able to tie that to things like catch rates of different species, which let us demonstrate that the decline of Chinook salmon in Lake Huron really drove the decline of the charter industry. And we haven't done as much specifically with recreational fishing, but we were able to look at some numbers from another comparable study in 2016 and figure out that about 70% of all the expenditures in Michigan for Great Lakes fishing are really due to the recreational fishery versus the charter fishery. So it's important to keep that in mind, that even though we talk a lot about expenditures for charter fishing, the expenditures for rec fishing are a bit bigger. And we know that we've had some declining angler effort in recent years. And we know too that the angler effort is what drives those economic impacts. Obviously, more people fishing, more people buying gas and tackle directly leads to more economic impacts in coastal communities. So if you look at this from the Michigan DNR statewide angler survey program, you see that there's been a real decline, especially since 2007 to 2009. And in fact, it's fallen below the target angler hours set by the Lake Michigan Management Plan that Jay led the development of a few years ago. So the question is kind of how can we get back to that level and start to see an uptick in both angler effort and economics. So something else I've worked a lot with over the years have been surveys of anglers and charter captains in particular. So we had the opportunity to ask this question in 2020 for a survey of all Michigan charter captains. And here I have specifically the MCBA member captains who are actively fishing Lake Michigan. And we asked them, what's the ideal percentage of different species in the catch? And this is, again, lake-wide, so it's not really taking into account regional differences. But you can see it's a good mixed bag fishery, with Chinook being the single most abundant fish, but not overwhelmingly the only most abundant fish in the catch. And we asked this same question back in 2016 to Michigan Steelheaders, so the biggest recreational fishing club organization in the state. And it was kind of amazing that we got pretty similar answers. Again, a mixed bag fishery, with Chinook being the most abundant fish, but not overwhelmingly the only abundant fish. So Caitlin, if you could put up a survey question, I thought we'd ask this group if this makes sense. And since we've surveyed a few different groups, again, I have MSSFA and MCBA up here, but also GLSI surveyed their own members and found again that it was kind of within this range. So the question up here, if you could take a look at it and just click the one that you agree with, says the survey suggests Lake Michigan anglers value a mixed bag fishery, with Chinook being the most abundant. And the actual ranges from these different surveys have been about 35 to 42% Chinook, 15 to 27% lake trout, 14 to 20% coho, 12 to 20% steelhead, and 4 to 8% brown trout. So the question is, do these ranges sound like reasonable targets for managers who are trying to manage the fishery? And do they sound like what you'd like to see the catch represent on a lake-wide basis for anglers? So if you can, and again, this is for recreational fishers. So if you happen to be on here just as a researcher and not really wearing your angler hat, then maybe don't answer. And if we can close this out, Caitlin, if you can see how many people have participated, we can get an answer here in real time. And see
I have a couple more people coming in quick, but.
Okay. So also, we're going to send out a survey at the end of this meeting for an evaluation to see how you like the program and if everything went smooth, but we'll also have a more detailed question on the same topic. So if you say, hey, this is a terrible mix, you can let us know exactly what you'd like to see later. Look at that. Now, 57% say this sounds like a good mix. 43% says not really ideal, but I could live with it. And no one says this is just flat out unacceptable. So that's interesting. This should help us out in a variety of ways as we go forward. thinking about the future of the fishery. So that's only one part of the equation though, right? And for some reason, I'm having trouble advancing slides, Caitlin. Any ideas? Okay, it started working. I don't know if the survey messed it up, but so also obviously the number of fish harvested can definitely impact satisfaction, and then satisfaction leads people to go fishing more, right? If you get a bunch of skunks, you're probably not going to want to go out fishing, at least in the same way, in the same place. So we generally tend to think that catch drives angler effort because it reinforces engaging in that behavior of fishing that keeps you going back. And that leads to more money spent fishing and, again, good economic conditions. So again, this is a hypothesis. This doesn't always hold true for every fishery. And there's obviously some other intangibles, you know, just spending time outside or with friends and such that are important drivers also. And in fact, if we really look at it, other research from around the world has really suggested that actual harvest does help drive satisfaction. But what's even more important is the perceived quality of the harvest. So if you expect to catch one lake trout when you go out fishing and you catch one lake trout, you might be very excited. And I've done that myself in a kayak, right? In Kayak Lake Michigan, catch one lake trout. Hey, that's really cool. But if you're expecting a board full of silver fish like this and you catch one lake trout, you're probably not very satisfied. So we want to deal with this a little bit and kind of try to set expectations appropriately and communicate them appropriately. And here we have a couple of graphs. This kind of shows what fisheries scientists kind of talk in terms of fish caught per angler hour or fish caught per 100 angler hour. And it's come to my mind that this is hard for people to wrap their heads around. What is 10 Chinook caught per 100 salmonine targeted boat angler hours? What does that really mean? So you can see there are some relationships there, but I thought we'd try to break it down in terms of an average trip. So the average salmonine boat fishing trip on Lake Michigan has 2.4 anglers per boat, 5.5 lines fished, 11.3 angler hours targeting salmonines. Again, kind of hard to wrap your mind around all the decimals there, but it's pretty close to what I'll call a standardized trip. Of 2 anglers fishing for 5 hours would equal 10 angler hours. So we have another question that Caitlin's going to put up here, and we're going to see how your satisfaction or your satisfaction in a hypothetical trip would match up with what we could actually expect from fishing conditions in Lake Michigan. So before you know what we can really expect based on the data, we got this question. If you go fishing for 5 hours on a boat with one other person, would you be satisfied if your boat harvested 3 salmonines? And we'll just say 1 Chinook salmon, 1 lake trout, and 1 steelhead. So you got 2 people fishing 5 hours on a boat and harvesting 3 salmonines, 1 of each of those species. So again, if you're a recreational fisher, please chime in on this poll and click either very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, neutral, somewhat dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied. So people were either satisfied, somewhat satisfied, or dissatisfied, and a few very dissatisfied. So that's an interesting spread, not really tilted strongly towards satisfied or dissatisfied. And I put those numbers up because when you look at the actual data for the average trip, the average boat angler on Lake Michigan, since 2008, the range of an average trip has been 1.6 to 3 fish caught per standardized trip. The best year was 2012, when catch rates were really sky high, if you recall. The best year in that time series, people averaged 3 salmonines per trip. And I think this was important to put up here because as part of planning processes, we've asked people, what do you think an ideal trip is? And people say, oh, we want double digits. You know, we want our group of people to go out on a boat and at least hook up on double digit numbers, if not land, you know, at least 10 salmon. And when you actually look at the numbers, the average person has a real hard time getting that kind of fishing success on a regular basis. So again, this was kind of for our planning purposes, just to say, how can we really relate what people want to catch to what they can really expect to catch? So a couple other things I want to remind you of quick. We do have the Great Lakes Angler Diary program. We've kind of transitioned into river steelhead fishing with our data recording, but we really welcome big lake data on steelhead in particular and on all salmon and trout species. So if you were part of the Salmon Ambassador program with Chinooks over the last few years, we do have this website up now, and we're having regular Zooms with steelhead fishing focused teams. Again, mostly river, but we really welcome a participation from the big lake too. And another quick note, if you're catching fish for the Great Lakes Angler Diary or for the diet study Brian will talk about in a few minutes, it's important to ID the fish right. And this time of year especially, you see small Chinook being caught that can be easily confused with coho. And as Chinook salmon grow, they change. Their morphology changes a little bit. Their coloration really changes a bit. So here you see a 10.5-inch Chinook salmon. You can see how the gums and inner mouth really get quite a bit darker as those fish get just a little bit bigger even. So it can be easy to miss the fact that you do have dark gums on that smaller Chinook salmon. And again, if you look at the tail of the fish on a 10.5-inch Chinook, you see a tail that looks nothing like an adult fish. No spots, deep fork in the tail. And as that fish gets a little bit bigger, you can see below there that this fish just has some spots starting to form and the tail starting to lose its fork. But if you compare these to a coho, really, you want to look at the shape of that anal fin. And we have some great ID resources that go into the specifics on the differences on the anal fins on our Michigan Sea Grant site there below, and also a video to the same effect. So with that, I'm just a couple of minutes over time. So